Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage, Stefan Chambers.
Hello again. Hello. What a week that was. You made the weather, and the weather was lovely. And so many only at Skoll moments this week. Only at Skoll does money work for us. Only at Skoll are 200 sheep, the currency of human spirit. Only at Skoll is the top line melody so hopeful. Only at Skoll is optimism a moral choice. You will all have your only at Skoll moments. Take them, treasure them, remember them. Store them against the days when you're less supported. Like you, I've been immersed in sessions, panels, talks, huddles, conversations, some arguments, some disagreements, a lot of hugs. And I know very well your mix of pragmatism and idealism, the sheer bloody-minded perseverance, and those flashes of insight. And I know very well just how much you support each other. And as I've seen our movement grow over the years, I've seen how this amazing event supports you in your hard, necessary, and sometimes lonely work. I think you deserve some applause. And I've seen a new side of you this year. I've seen something steelier and more urgent. I've seen some anger. Did anyone see the slide, by the way, the "Don't trust anyone who isn't angry" slide? I thought that was a good slide for this week. And I've seen a much, much greater focus on mistakes. Errors that are caused not by our lack of knowledge, but by execution failure. Atul Gawande's words, "We've overcome ignorance. Now we need to address ineptitude." Those words struck home. Laurie Garrett on antibiotic resistance was scalding. Bono talked about good people doing bad deals. If we're right in the moral sphere, and I think we're right in the moral sphere, we need to be right in the economic, financial, and policy spheres too. And I've also seen a much clearer-eyed focus from you on politics. Not just the politics of nationalism, populism, so excoriated yesterday by Anne-Marie Slaughter and Ernesto Zedillo, but big, mainstream, institutional politics too. Michael Porter demonstrated, with some forces and a matrix, why the institutions of politics are the major barrier to advancing society. And as you'd expect, you care about media, both social and traditional, and their necessary, complicated dance with politics and money and truth, whose mojo, by the way, made a rather welcome return this week, I thought. You can't listen to Babangona, to Build Change, to Last Mile Health, or Polaris, and doubt the truth of their interventions, and the truthfulness of the amazing people, those amazing entrepreneurs behind those organizations. And I also saw signs of real traction this week. Another $100 million from the Omidyar Foundation. Ford's announcement of mission-related investment. The incredible interest among investors in the work you do. More applause, I think. More applause. And in the mildly psychedelic haze of too much coffee and too many late nights, and because I can't always read my notes, I sometimes wondered whether I dreamt some of this week. Was it a rock star or the president of the World Bank who said that capitalism requires instruction? Is there really a fusion of money and art and politics and social justice and activism that promises such progress? Can insurance and currency swaps, universal healthcare and gender equity really tilt the world towards a juster equilibrium? Have we successfully abnormalized any talk of Voldemort? Did we witness the creation of a new supergroup on Wednesday? Is Rockstar another of Jeff's achievements? Were Don Henley, Bono, Michael Franti, and Sal Khan all on this stage asking us to imagine one world? The answers, my friends, may not be on social media, though the revolution will be live streamed. And now, for the second time this week, I have to walk and talk. It is my very great pleasure to introduce to you a Skoll awardee from 2013, an inspiring participant in yesterday's politics session. The first time I met this person, she was brilliantly rude about her Oxford professors. I was completely sold. Fresh back from California, fresh back from change.org, she really is all about the change. Ladies and gentlemen, Gemma Mortensen.
Thank you. Stefan, doesn't he make you feel better and steelier? Well, I'm here to introduce somebody else. And the person I'm going to introduce is Brendan Cox. Many of us here in the Skoll community know Brendan from the many years of work that he's done, both helping to found Crisis Action, working for Prime Minister Gordon Brown on his agenda to end global poverty, or leading what have been some of the most effective international campaigns on global development of the last decade. But others of us will only know Brendan because of the tragic events of last year, when in June, his wife, Jo Cox, a British MP who in only 1 year of having been in Parliament had already established herself as being an incredibly effective and authentic representative of her constituents back in her hometown in Yorkshire, but also a very, very powerful champion for humanitarian values. And Jo, in the run-up to the EU referendum, was murdered by one of her constituents, a far-right extremist. It really strikes me that on today of all days, with what is going on in Syria, Jo's voice, an issue that she was so passionately cared about, is very, very sorely missed. But in the aftermath of Jo's death, Brendan displayed a courage, a dignity, a grace that gave so many of us strength somehow. And I want to read for you the words that he read out at the trial of her murderer. The killing of Jo, in my view, was a political act, an act of terrorism. But in the history of such acts, it was perhaps the most incompetent and self-defeating. An act driven by hatred, which instead has created an outpouring of love. An act designed to drive communities apart, which has instead pulled them together. An act designed to silence a voice, which has instead allowed millions to hear it. Since Jo's death, Brendan has channeled a personal tragedy into a mission to look at the root causes of social division and how to bring back together our fractured communities. And I can think of no one more appropriate to provide some closing reflections to the theme of this year's Skull World Forum. So please join me in welcoming Brendan Cox. So Brendan, thank you for being with us. I think it's fair to say that for everybody, particularly those of us from Europe and the US, that none of us really could have imagined the amount of political disruption that we're seeing and experiencing, like even 5 years ago. What do you think is going on?
I think fundamentally, the big change has not been in the number of people who are extremists, the number of people who purvey hate. But I think what has happened is that hatred has become legitimised. Mm-hmm. Whether that's by the Trumps or the Le Pens or the Farages or whoever else, it has become a acceptable part of the political discourse. And what that has meant is that people who held these views already are much more likely to act on them. So that's why you're seeing soaring rates of hate crime right across Europe, in the US as well. And the thing that worries me, I think, is that underneath that, the drivers that are driving that insecurity, whether that's economic, whether that's sort of physical security concerns about terrorism, whether that's cultural insecurity, we know that those are going to be growing. Those themes are not going away. And so while at the moment you haven't seen big shifts in attitudes across society, there is something that could happen if we're not careful.
So, I mean, that's obviously the context that led to Jo's death, a worrying context. And yet, as you mentioned in the remarks that I just read out at Jo's trial, at the trial of Jo's murderer, that there was just this incredible outpouring of love and support in the wake of her death. What was going on, and what has that shown you about what you want to do next?
I think for me, what it showed me at the time was that that was actually what British society was still represented by. I said at the time that on that day there was one act of supreme hatred and cowardice, but it unleashed thousands upon thousands and actually millions of acts of compassion and kindness. The support that we had as a family. I remember on the day of Jo's funeral, driving in the car with my son Kulin. And along the road, thousands and thousands of people had turned out. We'd actually asked people not to, but thousands and thousands of people had turned out. And Kulin turned to me and said, I knew that lots of people love Mummy, but I didn't realise that many people did.
Yeah. And they did. And somehow, I think what you managed to spot, even in the teeth of grief, was how much of that feeling was out there. And I know that that's something that you're looking to work on and work with going forwards. I want to take you back to your teenage years, to when you were 17.
It's a worrying development.
I know, yeah. Well, most of us were probably, having cigarettes behind the bike check or something. Brendan, at the age of 17, as a scout, he's a proud scout, went off to Bosnia to go and work with children who had been traumatized by the war there, including children who were survivors of the genocide in Srebrenica. We've talked a lot about kind of otherness this week, and I have to say, all I can think of you going off to Bosnia at the age of 17 was what they thought of you. But anyway, you know, you went there over many years to work with these children, and you went there with Joe. You both went there several times. So it was obviously an experience that changed your life and changed Joe's life as well. And I just wonder, you know, looking back at that now, how has it changed your perception of current events?
I think what it did at the time, I don't know what they made of me. A very dodgy Bosnian at the time. I think what it taught me was two things. One, almost the banality of evil. How, you know, if you'd have travelled around the former Yugoslavia in the 1980s, you would never have thought in 1,000 years that you could have, within a couple of years, the descent to barbarity and genocide that you had. And so how feeble our institutions are, how feeble and vulnerable and fragile society is. I think the thing that it taught me was that, and this has been reinforced by recent events, is that the things that we take for granted, the underpinning structures of liberalism, are only as strong as their defenders. There's no automatic brake. When society starts to go off the rails, it can go heinously off the rails. And that unless we are providing scaffolding for those institutions, for those ideas, for those beliefs, that they are vulnerable. What it also, I think, more optimistically showed me, though, was the capacity of an individual to make a difference. In that case, I couldn't do anything about the conflict. The conflict had happened, that those children had lost their parents, and I worked with them on and off for 12 years. And understood the long-term impact of that, but I also got that sense of agency, that in fact, on a very human level, on a very personal level, there's something you can do, and that's the thing that I hold on to now, and think actually of all the people in this hall and all the people who are working on these issues on a day-in, day-out basis, that the capacity still for change and for impact is absolutely huge when we put our minds to it.
And I think that, I mean, from having heard, you know, you and Joe talk about those experiences, just the profound human connection that you made with many of the people that you work with out there, and what an enriching experience it was as well. I mean, it makes me wonder, I think for all of us, you know, we share an anxiety, a fear about what's going on. It clearly is something momentous. But there's a voice in many of our heads that kind of says, you know, it will be okay. You know, democracy's not going to fall apart. It's going to be all right. And from what you've seen and experienced more recently, I just wonder whether you think, you know, have we really grit this? Do we really know what's going on, or are we even still being a bit complacent?
Yeah, I think even post-Trump, so actually Joe and I've been working on these issues now for, well, since Bosnia, but in a more concentrated way. I started a piece of work about 2 years ago, really looking at what was driving populism, the reaction to it, and what we might do around it. And so Joe and I and the guy that I started this work with, Tim Dixon, were talking about this on a regular basis. And I think always our assumptions had been that society was on an onward march, post-Second World War, an onward march towards progress. And both Joe and I started to doubt that. And events, whether that was the rise of the Front National in France or Trump in the US, started to eat at that confidence. I still think we're way too complacent. I still don't think we've quite realised how quickly things could change. And what's happened in this last period is that those forces have got a beachhead. They've got a beachhead in the most powerful office in the world, but in lots of other institutions and media and elsewhere, they've got a beachhead, and they are starting to popularise a narrative which is cancerous and needs to be challenged. Having said that, I remain hugely optimistic that we can do that, but you can only do it if you first diagnose the problem and got a sense of the scale, importance and gravity of it, and I don't think we've quite got that yet.
Well, you mentioned that you started this some time ago, and actually where you started that work with Tim was around the refugee crisis and understanding people's attitudes to refugees. And it then took quite a different turn and has become much more around understanding people's attitudes to the other, whoever the other is, and also around why communities are breaking down and what to do about that. Can you just talk about why that shift happened and now what you're going to do?
Yeah, so as you say, that the work started off the back of the refugee crisis, and this sense in Europe that this was playing into existing dynamics around otherness. But what was interesting in the opinion research we did was quite how little people differentiate. So whether you're a migrant or a Muslim or a Jew or a Mexican, there is this sense and fear of otherness, and it's that dynamic that's driving these debates. And meanwhile, civil society is very structured around individual groups. So it's structured around migrants or Muslims or refugees or anti-Semitism. We're fighting this group by group. But what our opponents are doing, what the far right are doing, is they're building and creating a narrative of otherness, which is pervasive and which they're then coming against individual groups. So I think our challenge and also our opportunity is actually if we can unite those forces of sort of pro-diversity, if you like, if we can unite them into a popular front, for want of a better term, then we can defeat those forces, because they're not... these forces do not represent the vast majority of people. What they've done very cleverly in the last period is to talk about themselves almost as if they're the silent majority. They're not silent, and they're not the majority, and we have to get much better. We have to get much better at both building our own narrative, but then also going back to a much more local community level and building on the existing experiences that people have and cherish about the communities that they live in. One of the things that cuts through in all of the work that we've been doing is that actually there is a equal and opposite. In fact, it's much more than equal. It's a much more powerful backlash against this narrative of hatred and division. And our challenge and also our opportunity is to give voice to that, because it's there.
Yeah. No, that really makes me think about Jo again, because one of the things I think she was so brilliant at was working with very different people. I mean, one of the things that was incredible to a lot of people in this country was when Jo died, how many people from across the political spectrum came out and celebrated her. It was extraordinary. I've never seen anything like it. And rooted in that was many of us who knew and loved her have remarked since she died, like just that spirit of there is nothing that can't be solved. Get up, you should and can do something about it. Find the people that you want to do it with you and off you go. And I think both of you embody this resourcefulness and this just refusal to be defeated. And, I've often asked myself, looking at Jo and looking at you, like, where does that come from? Because it's limitless, it seems, in both of you. And I think for many in the people in this room who work on very, very difficult issues, that's something that many people need to tap repeatedly. So,
yeah, I mean, I think it's a sense of optimism in the human condition. That sounds a bit grand. I think for Jo, where her politics started, so Jo grew up in Batley, up in Yorkshire. She never wanted to be an MP, she only ever wanted to be the MP for her hometown, for Batley and Spen. And her politics came from her community. So her granddad was a postman, and when she was little, he used to take her on his round and take her round the streets. And that sort of empathy that Jo developed, and was one of her sort of defining characteristics, she had it much more than I did, was this incredible sense and faith in humanity and in the intrinsic ability of humans when they are together, and when you bring people together, to be able to empathize and to be able to build communities. And therefore the challenge, and again the opportunity, is to find ways of doing that. We're living lives which are increasingly in silos, whether that's because of the way that we work or the way that we live, or where we spend our time in social media. But actually, when you bring people together, people do find connections. Jo in her, I think, last speech in Parliament, when actually she was talking about Syria, but she quoted Edmund Burke, who said that all that is needed is for evil to triumph is for good men and women to do nothing. And I think she had this instinct that actually, if we pull together the forces that we can unite, the instincts, the sort of deeply human instincts that we can tap into, are far more powerful than our adversaries. So even now, I know that she would be hugely positive and optimistic about our capacity to win this battle, and it will, I think, be the defining battle of our time, but only if we all treat it with the seriousness it deserves, remain positive, and build on the momentum which I think there's beginning to be now.
Thank you very much. I think just so all of you know, the thing that Brendan's working on immediately at the moment is bringing together what will be one of the biggest kind of gatherings of people in the UK in many years, I think. Millions of people around the anniversaries of Joe's death. And what's so beautiful about that, it will be very much like Joe. It will be fun. It will be people from all walks of life, and it will be really a celebration of life. And I think, you know, just as a friend of you both, on a personal note, I think that seeing you celebrate life and people, even in the depths of something so awful, has been profoundly inspirational. And I know Joe would be very, very, very proud of you. So on behalf of us all, thank you very, very much.
Clearest reason for music, for culture, is it gives us meaning. We started as an idea, a group of musicians getting together and seeing what might happen when strangers meet. We scoured from Venice to Istanbul, Central Asia, China, and Mongolia, looking for incredible talent.
American orchestra. That's very interesting.
This was like the Manhattan Project of music. No one knew what was going to happen.
I knew there was going to be naysayers.
You're taking this traditional music, mixing it together and diluting these traditions.
Arts is about opening up to possibility. Possibility links to hope. We all need hope.
I'm always trying to figure out how I fit in the world, which I think is something that I share with 7 billion other people.
Since I left Syria, I found myself experiencing emotions far more complex, like can a piece of music stop a bullet?
In 1966, Cultural Revolution, my parents asked me to learn music to escape.
In Iran, the revolution, chaos, I had to leave. By trying to kill the human spirit, the answer of the human spirit is to revenge with beauty.
I think the challenge is keeping your roots alive.
That's a new way of thinking about music, about what people can do together.
There's no East or West. It's just a globe.
We don't speak perfect English or perfect Chinese or perfect Persian, but we speak perfect music language.
Being part of this experiment, making me understand what it means to be alive.
Everybody is afraid, but you make a connection to another human being. You can turn fear into joy.
folk musicians from all around the world. In this stage, we have musicians from Syria, from the US, and from Galicia. Kieran Asme, Kyle Sana, John Hatfield, Roberto Comesaña. Silk Road has been working for the last 18 years to try to create global understanding through cultural exchange. And we use music for that. And we try to create this common ground that I have been hearing about for the last 2-3 days. And to me it's fascinating, the amazing community, Mr. Skull, you have created all around the world. And because this is all about community, I'm gonna try to take you to where I come from, which is Galicia, in the northwest corner of Spain, in which the bagpipes are like the national instrument, and in which when you play bagpipes, people will gather around you, and they will dance, and they will cheer, and they will be part of a new community with new people. So, are you game? Would you like to come to Galicia with us? Yes? Okay, so the first thing we need to do a dance together is music, right? We have that. Do we have dancers? Do we have dancers? Yes? Up, 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 up. Nice, beautiful. Okay, to the right, to the left, to the right, to the left. Yes, to the right and bounce, to the left and bounce. Nice, beautiful. So, welcome to Galicia, and welcome to the new community.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you, everybody. Please have a seat. You've been great dancers. Thank you. We're going to take you, actually, we're going to switch homes. And we're going to take you from Christina's hometown, well, you know, Galicia, to my home country. We're going to go to Syria. And I'm going to take you, in particular, to a very specific setting. We're going to go to a wedding in one of the villages. I wrote this piece a few years back, about maybe 10 years back. And the piece is inspired by the mood one can find in a Syrian wedding. I'm talking particularly about weddings that happen in villages, where, you know, these weddings take place usually at the public square for everybody to attend. Even if you're not a big fan of your neighbor, you have to invite them, kind of wedding. They're gonna show up anywhere because the families of the groom and the bride gonna cook for everybody. So that's why maybe people also show up. And the landscape, or the musical landscape of these parties, really depend largely on the musicians who show up. People come up with different songs, different instruments. So the musical landscape really changes according to that. And this piece tries to depict the mood. So you're gonna see us playing loud at times. Usually these wedding parties are long. We're not gonna keep you for so long. You don't have to worry about that. But certainly unpredictable. And I would like, on behalf of everybody on stage and off stage, I would like to dedicate this piece to all the Syrians who managed to fall in love in the last 6 years. I find it quite inspiring. I find it quite inspiring that in spite of all the bullets, the barrel bombs, and even chemical attacks, people have the resilience in themselves to fall in love. Whether they get married or not, that's none of our business. But I find it really inspiring that people have it in themselves to do so. And it seems to me that maybe falling in love is one of the very few human rights that no authority can take away from you. So this is from all of us, all of them. I hope you enjoy.
The Silk Road Ensemble. Astonishing. Kenan Azmi got off a plane about 2 hours ago. He got off a plane about 2 hours ago because he's Syrian and he couldn't get a visa. And his visa was knocked back, and it was knocked back, and it was not forthcoming, and it was knocked back. And the Skoll team wrote to the UK Immigration Services, and so did Peter Tofano, and so did Yo-Yo Ma, and so did I. And the visa was forthcoming, and I am grateful.
Thank you. Thank you.
3 times is pushing it, but I am going to do it again. It's a huge privilege now to introduce Anya Grundmann from NPR. National Public Radio is a refuge for some unfashionable virtues: truth, balance, and perspective. And with Anya will be these amazing Silk Road Ensemble musicians. Welcome, Anya.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. It's been quite a wonderful 4 days here. You just got to get here, a couple hours. There's been a lot of talking, and I think it's just so wonderful to have a moment with music because it takes us to another place. And you can see you are both so transportive, and it makes such, it lifts the spirits. I wanted to talk about the Silk Road Ensemble brings musicians together from all over the world, who with all kinds of instruments that many of us are not that familiar with. The Galician bagpipe. You may not know this, but the Galician bagpipe has it is a decibel level of 120, which is technically illegal in many places. I looked it up. I think it's a thunderclap or a chainsaw is the level. So I know you both have learned so much from working on the ensemble and working together. How have you sort of adapted to working with each other and making it work, given that you're both playing reed instruments, but there's a big difference in the soundscape?
I think you said a beautiful word at the beginning about listening, right? We are constantly listening to each other, and even if you play an instrument that is the loudest instrument in the world, then you have to make even a bigger effort to actually not only to listen to the other, but also to make the other to listen below of what you're trying to say. And that's, to me, the beautiful challenge when I am working with all the musicians of Silk Road, because we are a collective of musicians from Israel, from China, from Syria, from Iran, from Korea, from Spain, and from all over the US. And the uniqueness of working together is not about the uniqueness of the instruments also, it's about finding the common language in between those traditions, and those languages most of the time are musical languages.
Christina has sometimes been referred to as the Jimi Hendrix of the gaita.
I'm Christina. Just to make that clear, I'm Christina Pacho.
I think you can
That's
see
enough.
why. Kenan, this has been, being from Syria, last few days just awful. The last 6 years, very challenging. I know you've been on a musical journey during this time, even gave up playing a little bit. How has your music evolved, or how are you thinking about your music in relation to your home?
You know, sometimes you do what you do. You know, you have to be honest, saying what you want to say. You know, as an artist, I always feel that you need 3 things. You need to have something to say to begin with. You need to have the tools to say what you want to say. In my case, it's the clarinet. And the third, you have to have the skills to use the tool to say what you want to say. So that at heart doesn't change. What changes sometimes is the context. When the Syrian uprising began 6 years ago, I stopped writing music. I continued to play because that's what I do.
but I stopped writing because I was experiencing emotions that are more complex than what art, for me, was able to provide. But then, later on, you realize that if the whole uprising was about people wanting to express an opinion, so therefore I have to hold on to my tool. I have an instrument that can be soft at times, but can also be loud at times. And it's my main way of expressing myself, so might as well hold on to that. I do believe, now more than ever, that making music is an act of freedom. And by practicing it, you hope that you inspire somebody. And it's been also something of, it helped me a lot to continue to do what I do. You know, but I do this now with more urgency, I think, than I did before.
Yeah, I find the sound of your clarinet so soulful and piercing in a certain way that goes straight into the emotional landscape. It's transportative. Thank you very much. One of the things that you may not know about all of these musicians and their fearless compatriot Yo-Yo Ma is that they have an incredible sense of playfulness and humor. And it's something that I think is so fundamental to your ability to connect and communicate. And it's so wonderful to see so many folks from across the world coming together and doing that. I wanted to, we've been having a lot of fun with the Silk Road over the years at NPR and also with Yo-Yo. I told someone the other day, in the 90s, I think we got Yo-Yo Ma on April Fool's Day to say that he was giving up the cello.
Oh no, you did it!
Yes, he did it, and he also said that he was giving it up because he just was a little bored with it, and instead he was going to learn the bandoneon, which is a kind of accordion. And we hired an accordion player who could play badly, and we did a whole segment on that. So he was so game. And so when we had a chance to do something with the Silk Road Ensemble, we thought of that playfulness and that connection. And so I wanted to share a little bit of what happened. We brought them to a prop warehouse in Brooklyn.
NPR Music created a space for us to express ourselves in a completely different way. And even the same piece of music we have been playing for years, it became a completely different kind of message and emotional reaction just because of the environment. And to me, that reminds me to the way Yo-Yo has created Silk Road, just to provide us with a platform that in which we will be safe to not only speak different music and languages, speak different cultures, but also finding the time to find the things that connects us all, as opposed to the things that disconnects us all. And that's to me the most powerful message Yo-Yo, the mentor, the humanist, has been passing by for the last 18 years to us. And that happens in many different levels. The humor and the sense of joy and fun also permeates. I don't know if any of you have seen the wonderful film, The Music of Strangers. You saw the clip? It's really a meditation on what it means to have a home and to go forth into the world and bring essence of that with you and then take what you've learned back
I think, through the movie. But I thought one of the most wonderful scenes is when you were in the refugee camp and you're working with kids, and so fun. You just lit them up. What was that like for you?
It was quite inspiring. We've done, Silk Road actually has done several trips to refugee camps, mainly in Jordan and Lebanon. This trip was a few years back, and you know, the whole point was just to go and play with the kids. You know, sometimes we forget that kids' main job is to play, and these kids are forced to be adults in no time. You know, and we went and we played, and I think what I got from them by far exceeds what I think I offered. But to see them being incredibly proactive, you know, trying to learn instruments, trying to play, is just tremendous. You know, you hope that you know, we managed to plant a little seed in somebody.
Yeah, it felt like something that was waiting to spring out of them, and that you were able to unlock that by having them make their own songs and make fun of each other and do selfies and musical experiments.
You know, but also you realize, you know, as a clarinetist or as anything, all of us can do something, you know. I think it was a very good reminder for myself and also for my colleagues. No matter how little what you think you're doing is, it can be of incredible help to somebody. So all of us can be, you know, can be involved, I think.
Yeah. So I think Yo-Yo has been calling you all venture culturalists. And you're a collective. You actually you're not employed by the Silk Road Ensemble, but it seems like a cauldron, bubbling full of incredibly entrepreneurial, searching people who are experts but want to share with the world in new ways, and you keep coming back to it as a kind of home. But what does that mean to you to be a venture culturalist?
Well, I mean, we're in a room full of social entrepreneurships, and the idea of cultural entrepreneurship is an idea that Yo-Yo has brought to us many years ago, and through that we have been working in different universities into trying to bring that topic to the main attention. But I don't know if I consider myself a cultural, how do you say that? Cultural?
Venture culturalist?
Venture, because to be a venture culturalist, you actually have to have something to support that. And going back to what you all doing here and what Kinan was talking about before, the way we work with that lack of capital is in building communities around us, communities that can support each other and that can help each other in the times of need. And that's the beauty about being a collective too, the fact that we are not full-time employees of the organization. That means you have to keep your independent life working, and then you bring something of your independent life to this community, the Silk Road community. You learn something from this guy coming from Syria, and then you take it back to where are you from. So the concept of home is constantly switching, but at the end, what makes the Silk Road and what makes this room so special too is all of us are immigrants somehow. Even if we haven't left the city we were born, the idea of living the space in which you were born makes you a person with a completely different perspective. So the immigrant quality, the being in between many different communities is what gives you the ability of being a, say that again?
A venture culturalist.
Oh, jeez, that's so difficult.
Well, Cristina Pato has, 10% of the people in her community actually play the gaita, right? That's part of your growing up. She's gone out into the world, introduced it to so many people. You've created a music festival back home, and now next week you're going off to the Cheyenne Reservation in Wyoming to work with
Montana.
Montana, to work with really underserved communities who are struggling to build community. Want to talk about that?
It does connect to what Kinan was saying before about his work in the refugee camps. And the beauty of Silk Road is we look abroad, but we try to look also in our environment too. So for the last few years, we have been trying to insert the arts in different programs in New York, where most of us are, but also in this Northern Cheyenne Reservation in Lame Deer, Montana. And it's exactly what he was saying before. Even just the fact of coming back year after year, even if it is just to create a piece of music, a piece of visual poetry, or cooking together, is already a very strong message of hope.
Yeah. Well, thank you, both of you. Your work is so inspiring, and the music itself makes a huge difference and lifts the spirit and allows people to feel, perhaps in ways that they haven't felt before. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Anya. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm told the stage is about to go dark, but you're not to leave. Stefan's going to come back, and then there's also going to be clips of images from the festival, and many of you might see yourself in them. So thank you so much.
Thank you, venture culturalists. Thank you, Anya. Thank you, Christina. And thank you, Keenan. Thank you for the music. Thank you for all the joy you're bringing. Who can live without it, I ask, in all modesty. And my daughters will kill me if I go on from there. So, at the risk of bringing us down, I wanted to recognize last night's bombing in Syria and recognize that it opens up yet more potential fault lines. It makes it yet more imperative for us to act with and for each other. It makes our security and our peace more fragile and more precious. I wish you safety as well as love. And love is a powerful force. So shall we get up again? Shall we remember Michael? Shall we remember Michael Franti, the Sierra Leone refugee all-stars, the Silk Road Ensemble? Are you up now? Up enough to sit? I am not going to forget the jam session here on Wednesday. I am not going to forget how you turn feelings into thoughtful action. How agriculture and housing and people trafficking and healthcare bend to your will. Yes, the Earth's crust and our security are riven by fractures. Yes, those fissures displace and scare, but your work is our common ground. It continues long after we've stopped dancing. And you'll see some of your work in the short film that replays for you this amazing week. I look forward to seeing you again next year. Travel safely. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Skoll World Forum. Our theme this year is fault lines, creating common ground. We live on fault lines, and we could name some less geological fault lines. Our common ground, our shared humanity, the vast resources of creativity, activism, ingenuity, altruism, science, and love will heal the rifts and bridge the gaps.
8 men now own as much wealth as half of humanity. That's a fault line. We are interested in new ideas for a different economic model, a more human economy.
We just have to work harder and we just have to work faster. I truly believe every single person, one person, we can overcome all the problems. And I know it because I've done it.
When we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. So we can't protect our wildlands without preserving the global environment.
In 1963, I was a kindergarten student in Korea. And I doubt that if the World Bank president had visited Korea, that he would look in that classroom and think that a future World Bank president was sitting in that classroom. So don't ever let anyone tell you that you can't be president of the World Bank Group.
So now I'm going to ask you an easy question. What's your favorite U2 song?
Another day!
Oh,
okay. And I can dance.
One of the most powerful ways to break down stereotypes and implicit bias is simply to actually spend a little bit of time in someone else's world with who they really are.
We're all trying to figure out how to make groups successful at delivering knowledge.
Honestly, one of the most important starting points is recognizing where you are personally part of the problem. What I mean by that is that it's very difficult to understand when you have adopted and become familiar and comfortable with a certain set of language, how that is perceived and felt by others.
If you're talking about development, then you're talking about empowering women. They really are providing job opportunities for men and women, boys and girls in their communities.
What are we really trying to do? Are we trying to make grants? Are we trying to make change? And if we're trying to make change, we need to be intentional in a very different way.
A good way to go about this, particularly when you talk about collective action, when you talk about advocacy, when you talk about all these things, please find a place of engagement with these local associations. Avoid duplicating.
People with intellectual disabilities are like a complex mystery that society just can't be bothered to figure out. So we just choose to ignore them.
Everything humans have created that counts toward progress has been built on ground scored by fault lines, on imperfect and shifting foundations. We've experienced times of wrenching change as we are experiencing now, and yet these ruptures, like earthquakes, force us awake. As we call forward our 2017 Skoll awardees, we celebrate the people they empower, whose power they unleash.
Human trafficking is one of the worst human rights abuses on the planet today. But human trafficking is also a business. We could begin to shift the market conditions, we could take the fight to the traffickers, and we could restore freedom.
We can't prevent earthquakes and typhoons, but we can prevent buildings from collapsing in them.
One thing seems to be true about us as human beings. We are not defined by the crises that strike our lives. We are defined by how we respond to them.
15 million jobs required on the continent of Africa next year. No NGO will solve that problem, no government will solve that problem. And you know, capitalism is not immoral, but it is amoral, and it requires instruction. We have to tell it what to do.
Right now, we are all going through an incredibly challenging time in this world. Going through incredibly challenging times just as families trying to get by. Incredibly challenging times as nations, and finally as a planet. When we move together, closer together in those times of challenge, that is the way that we all rise up.
In honour of meeting you, I went to my local Oxfam shop to pick out a little gift for you.
Oh my God, I'm so touched.
In your previous commentary, you said you were fucked, and I think that's Irish for meaning that you're willing to take a risk for opportunity for others.